A coconut crab can crush your hand. In September of 1940, a British colonial administrator named Gerald Gallagher was supervising the settlement of a small uninhabited island in the Central Pacific called Nikumaroro. His workers reported finding a human skull on the southeast shore. Gallagher recovered 12 additional bones, a woman's shoe, and a box that had originally contained a navigational sextant. He sent everything to the headquarters of the Western Pacific High Commission. The bones disappeared during the Second World War. We will probably never find them. 3 years before the bones were found, Amelia Earhart and her navigator Fred Noonan vanished over the Central Pacific Ocean. The date was July 2nd, 1937. They were attempting the longest leg of an around-the-world flight. They never arrived at their destination, Howland Island, and they were never recovered. The official conclusion was that the plane ran out of fuel and crashed at sea. This is the consensus view. There is also an alternative hypothesis. Since 1988, a private research group called TIGAR, the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, has investigated the possibility that Earhart and Noonan crash-landed on the reef of Nikumaroro Island, survived briefly as castaways, and died there. The Nikumaroro hypothesis is not the consensus view, but it is also not refuted. Multiple lines of evidence have been collected over 40 years. The bones Gallagher found in 1940 are one of those lines of evidence. We are going to walk through the rest of the evidence because the case involves an animal, a specific animal that lives on Nikumaroro to this day that may have scattered the body. The animal is the coconut crab, Birgus latro. It is the largest terrestrial arthropod alive on Earth. Adults reach approximately 1 meter from leg tip to leg tip and weigh up to 4 kilograms. The shell is deep purple-blue with darker red highlights. The front claws are oversized relative to the body, disproportionately so even for a large crab. Coconut crabs are found throughout the Indo-Pacific on tropical islands from the Indian Ocean east to Polynesia. Nikumaroro is within that range. Multiple tiger expeditions have documented coconut crab populations on the island. The animal lives on land as an adult. It can climb trees up to 6 meters high. It will drown if submerged in seawater for an extended period, the inverse of most crustaceans. It eats fruit, fallen coconuts, smaller crabs, the occasional small bird, and any carrion it finds. Coconut crabs can live 40 years. The crabs Gerald Gallagher would have been walking past in 1940 would have been the parents and grandparents of the crabs the tiger researchers walked past in 2007. This is the animal we are profiling. The first piece of evidence we need to establish is whether a coconut crab can physically break human bones. In 2016, a team led by Shin Ichiro Oka at the Okinawa Tsurushima Foundation Research Center measured the pinching force of coconut crab claws across 29 specimens. The peak force recorded was approximately 3,300 newtons. For reference, an adult human bite generates about 700 newtons. An adult lion bite generates about 4,500 newtons. The coconut crab's grip is closer to a lion's than to a human's. The crab is generating that force with a single claw, not with full body muscles. A force of 3,300 newtons is sufficient to fracture human long bones, the femur, the humerus, under direct compression. A claw of that strength would also be sufficient to crush smaller bones, fingers, toes, ribs, outright. The crab does not bite in the sense of using teeth. It crushes in the sense of using a static pressure pincer that closes slowly and grips indefinitely. A crab that closes its claw on a human bone is not going to let go. The crab will hold the pressure until the bone fractures or until the soft tissue around it gives way. The grip force is established. The first evidence is in. The second piece of evidence is whether a coconut crab would actually eat human remains. Coconut crabs are confirmed scavengers. Their natural diet includes carrion, dead birds, dead fish washed ashore, and the corpses of other crabs. They are opportunistic. Like most arthropods of their size, they have no specific preference for any single food source. They eat what they find. There have been multiple documented cases of coconut crabs attacking and eating live animals. birds, including ground-nesting seabirds, small rats, smaller crabs, and at least one documented case of a coconut crab killing and eating a Polynesian rat. The live prey cases are rare but exist. Whether a coconut crab would scavenge a human corpse is, biologically speaking, not in question. They would. The corpse is dead protein. The crab eats dead protein. There is no behavioral barrier. Coconut crabs on inhabited Pacific islands have been documented consuming the remains of stillborn livestock and domestic animals on multiple occasions. The dietary motive is established. The second evidence is in. The third piece of evidence is whether coconut crabs were present at the scene. Tiger field expeditions to Nikumaroro between 1989 and 2017 have documented an active coconut crab population on the island. The crabs are observable, photographable, and present in sufficient numbers to be a routine encounter for any researcher walking the shoreline. The crabs were almost certainly present in 1940 when Gerald Gallagher's workers found the skull. Coconut crab populations on small Pacific atolls are stable across human-scale timeframes when the islands are uninhabited. Nikumaroro was effectively uninhabited between European discovery in 1824 and the colonial settlement in 1939. If Earhart and Noonan crash-landed on Nikumaroro in 1937, they would have shared the island with a healthy coconut crab population. The location evidence is established. The third evidence is in. The fourth piece of evidence is the bone count. The human skeleton has 206 bones. Gerald Gallagher's workers found 13 bones on Nikumaroro in 1940. The skull plus 12 additional pieces. That is roughly 6% of a complete skeleton. The remaining 193 bones were never recovered. They are not in the area where the 13 bones were found. They were not in any obvious nearby location when Tiger searched in subsequent decades. If a human body was deposited on Nikumaroro and decomposed there, the bones would not naturally walk away. Wind and tide do not selectively remove individual bones from a skeleton at the rate of 14 out of 15. Something carried them. The candidates for carrying small to medium bones across an island are limited. Birds rarely do it at that scale. Rats are not strong enough for larger bones. Wind redistributes the smallest pieces, but not femurs and ribs. The candidate that fits the profile is the coconut crab. In 2007, Tiger ran an actual forensic test on Nikumaroro to determine whether coconut crabs could plausibly scatter human remains. They placed a pig carcass, roughly the size of an adult human torso, on the island and left it. They recorded what happened. Within 2 weeks, the carcass had been stripped to bone by a combination of coconut crabs and smaller strawberry hermit crabs. The crabs consumed the soft tissue completely. The skeleton was exposed. Then the scattering began. Over the following months, individual bones were dragged from the original site. The Tiger team returned periodically to map the dispersal. By the end of approximately 1 year, some of the bones had been moved 60 feet from where the carcass had been placed. Smaller bones disappeared entirely. They could not be found despite repeated searching. There was, however, a limit to the test. The largest bones, the major long bones, the pelvis, the skull, were not moved into the forest interior. They were displaced from the original site, but not carried far. This is consistent with crabs being unable to physically transport bones above a certain mass. The 2007 test partially confirms the hypothesis. The crabs scatter remains. They do not scatter all of them. We can now assemble the case. Coconut crabs have the grip strength to break human bones. They have the dietary behavior to scavenge a human corpse. They were present on Nikumaroro in 1937 and in 1940. They demonstrably scatter human-sized skeletal remains over a 1-year time frame, with smaller bones being dispersed or lost entirely. These facts are established. What is not established is that Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan were on Nikumaroro at all. The Nikumaroro hypothesis remains contested. The 13 bones from 1940 are gone. The most recent forensic reanalysis by Dr. Richard Jantz at the University of Tennessee in 2018 applied modern measurement techniques to the original hoodless data and concluded the bones were more similar to Earhart's than to 99% of individuals. This is a probabilistic finding, not a positive identification. Even if we accept the Nikumaroro hypothesis, we cannot say with certainty that the coconut crabs scattered Earhart's body specifically. We can say that if a human body was deposited on Nikumaroro and left to decompose, the coconut crabs would have processed it within weeks. That much is consistent with the 2007 test. The verdict at present is plausible but unproven. Tiger is still searching. Multiple expeditions have brought back artifacts, pieces of aircraft aluminum, a cosmetics jar from the 1930s, fragments of a woman's shoe that are consistent with the hypothesis but have not produced a definitive identification. The coconut crabs are still on the island, the same population, generation after generation, scavenging whatever the tide brings, walking past whatever the island holds. If Amelia Earhart did end her life on Nikumaroro, then the animals that disposed of her body are the great-great-grandchildren of the same species that may still hold pieces of her in their burrows. Coconut crabs hoard food. Bones found in coconut crab burrows have been documented elsewhere in the Pacific. The case is open. The suspect is on the island. If you watched all the way through, hit subscribe. Next week, the marsupial that mates itself to death.